Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And in today's video I would like to tell you how it is like to have me as a teacher, because I received a lot of reviews this year for the course and some of them highlight my role as a teacher. So not just about the material that's there and the tasks that are there, it's like people were commenting about my skills as well, my teaching skills, and these are some of the reviews. And this video might sound like I'm complimenting myself a bit too much, but I figured that if you don't tell people and if you don't show it, then before having a class with me it's impossible to find out what I'm like as a teacher. So I would like to kind of show it a bit more in this video and tell you a bit more so you have a better understanding before even before having a class with me. So first of all, as an introduction, I would like to say that in our lives we have so many different roles. Some of us are sons, daughters, boyfriends, girlfriends, brothers, sisters, and so on. Someday maybe we'll be parents. We have so many roles that we have to students, sportsmen if you're, or sportswomen if you're into sports, and there are so many roles that you take on during your life and they change as you grow. And I would like to tell about my role as a teacher and how it started. It actually started, I think, even before I was born. So when I was in mom's tummy, when she was pregnant with me, my father, both of my professors are PhD professors and they have over 12 years of teaching experience at the university. So basically, when my dad was preparing for his PhD thesis defense, my mom was pregnant with me. And then when I was about to be born, like I was planned to be born a bit later, but basically I was born a few days before my mom had to defend her thesis. And of course the whole thing got moved a bit because of me. I came, surprise, surprise. But I was listening to all those topics that they were discussing in the time. So some people, some people say you should put some classical music for the babies, some Mozart. I was listening to economics and macroeconomics that my parents were preparing because they're professors in economics. So maybe that's how the whole DNA was composed and structured in a way to also make me a teacher later on in life. And I actually started out teaching in my second semester of UBB studies. And also we went to St. Petersburg this summer, and there was the beautiful Sachs Cathedral, and there is a statue of the French architect who was kind of responsible for most of the design and everything of the cathedral. And there's a statue of him, and it's made out of all the pieces and of all the materials that the cathedral is made of, at least most of them. And that kind of symbolizes that throughout life we take pieces of what we work on or our environment and we become that. And that's why I kind of, for my life, while I was still a pupil at school and a student in high school, I noticed the things and the traits of the teachers that I liked and kind of incorporated them in my teaching style. So for example, since I know the material and what I'm explaining, and there is also saying that if you speak a language you can make jokes in it and you can understand humor in it. Same goes for math. Math is also a universal language. And when you really understand something, you can try and make metaphors and jokes and make it as simple as possible and use practical examples. And that's what I always do in my course and in my classes to make the concept stick in the head a bit better. So for example, I had a chemistry teacher back in high school, and from chemistry I remember absolutely nothing. Like if you ask me about the formula, how those two chemicals combine, what they make, I cannot answer that. But what I do remember is a story that our teacher told us about a dentist friend of hers who basically, when he was doing a tooth implant, he put a metal there that is not compatible and kind of erodes the jaw. Basically it messes up the whole mouth. And that was the takeaway with the story, was that you should really know your reactions of the chemical compounds, because if you don't, then you can mess up your patient's jaw. That was an example I still remember to this day, even though it was back in school. And well, now I'm not finishing, but I'm in my second year of master's. So yeah. And also another trait I really liked from one of my primary school teachers. So it was a teacher that taught me English in primary school. It was not from the school, but basically I was going to classes to her. And at the beginning of the lesson, she would always let me speak, actually. She would say, "How are you?" And just to have a small convo before we start the lesson. And as a kid, I didn't realize what she was doing, but also what my parents told me is that the idea behind it is that you let someone, if something is bothering a person or something happened or they have a question they really want to ask you that's not really kind of content related to the class, if you don't let them speak about it, if you don't listen to them in the first few minutes, the other minutes, basically the majority of the hour that remains, will be less productive, because when something is in your head and you're constantly thinking about it, you can't really focus on the new information that's being presented to you in the moment. So that's why at the beginning of each class, I of course offer the opportunity to my students to speak, to ask me questions if they have questions about the selection procedure, moving to Vienna. And then after a few minutes of discussions, we can proceed, of course, with the math stuff, the fun. For you, it's the fun stuff. For me, it's the actual fun stuff. So yeah, that's and some people think of it maybe it's like a waste of 1 or 2 minutes, but I think of it as an investment into making the other 58 minutes as productive as possible. And also, when I notice that when I'm trying to explain a topic and then I ask questions about it, what I've just explained, and tasks, for different people, math goes, well, differently. And of course, some people might have taken a gap year, or they might not have had so much math in school. And of course, it's different levels of understanding and different levels of kind of endurance during the lesson. So for example, some people can handle 1 hour very easily, and for some people it's tougher. And the brain just kind of loses focus at some point, and it needs a little break. So when I notice that when I'm asking a question about the task and the student is responding very slowly, or they're confused, I of course re-explain it. But when I notice it's a point that I really have to basically make them have a break, I just stop the explanations. I try to think of a practical example, or try to tell a funny story that's related to the content, and in a way to make their brain relax a bit, kind of restart itself, like a Windows computer. When you press the restart, and it just basically deletes all the files that you have there, and then start again. And so that person can really spend the remaining of the class actually being productive and not just being exhausted and drenched. Because for me, it doesn't matter. I can conduct, and I can teach classes the whole day. I did it before. I do it many times actually. A lot of days are like that when it's the exam season. So for me, it's no problem. My brain can handle it. But when I see that someone's really having not the best time understanding something, and if I keep explaining the same concepts again and again and again and again to make it stick in the brain, it just won't stick. So yeah, that's what I do. Also, if I open the Zoom conference and I see that the person is crying, it happened to me a few times. A person is crying and they're just super motivated and they're feeling super bad because they're not understanding something. I will not hesitate to tell you the most embarrassing stories from my life to make you feel a bit better, because it's normal. We learn, we make mistakes. Sometimes, some days are better than others. And when it happened recently, I basically told my student about the story when I was writing my bachelor thesis. And I was writing it during the summer to graduate on time before the masters would start. And some days were okay, I was writing pretty nicely, and then some days were just like a block, like a mental block, and I couldn't write. I was just looking at the screen, I was looking back at me, I was like, okay, what do I do? And so one day I was just like super exhausted and super irritated at everything. I went to the study room. After a few hours, I went back up to my room and I was just crying and slept the whole day. So sometimes you need such days, it's normal. But in these cases, if you are not sure how good of friends you are with math at the moment, and you think that maybe some topics you missed in school, or you didn't have them, or you took a break from school and now you have to remember a lot of things again, they're not fresh in your head, it might make some sense to actually start the preparation a bit before. Because if you have I call it like a time pillow to fall back on in case you're struggling, or in case you have a study plan but sometimes something happens and it doesn't go according to plan, and you have to spend more days on one topic, or you basically cannot study over the weekend because something comes up. And in these cases, it's much better to start preparing a bit earlier rather than later, because it will be just less stressful, and you will allow yourself to have those bad days, because we all have them. We're human, it's normal. So don't try to be too harsh on yourself if you're having such a day. Everyone goes through such days, don't worry, even the teachers. So yeah. Also, another thing that about the material, so basically the course was made without the assistance of ChatGPT, and I can proudly say it, because it was launched before ChatGPT became mainstream, and everything there, all the material that you see there was kind of passed through me, and I was making sure to include what I really would like to see myself when I was preparing for the entrance exam. So when I saw a topic, and of course explain the basics, but if I see a moment where I would myself be doubting what do I do here, or what's exactly the point here, and I really take my time there and take the space there to explain things that I know most people would struggle with, because in my mind those are tricky parts, and I would rather explain a bit more so people really have a perfect understanding of what they're reading, rather than to just say a formula and say definition and just be over with it. That's not what I do. I really make sure that you understand what the topic is about. And all the tasks there, of course, there are over 500 tasks, and that number might seem a bit intimidating and scary, but they're spread out around the topics in a nice way. Like, it's not one topic and 500 tasks for each topic, so don't worry, so you're not overwhelmed. Because I understand that, for example, after a full meal, and we all want a sweet treat to kind of polish it off, and for some people a meal without the dessert is not a complete meal. So to be full, imagine you're having dessert and you just want 2 to 3 cookies. You don't need more cookies, right? Because if you have 100 cookies of the same taste and of the same style and everything, you will just feel bad, and you would want to, well, you'll be nauseous maybe. And that's why in the course you have tasks, but it's not too many. They don't overwhelm you. So of course you have the theory, you have the easier tasks to warm up and to really get the hang of how you should approach them, and then you have several harder exam style and format tasks to really know what to expect. And I don't overwhelm you with like hundreds of the same task for the same topic, because then it's not as productive. Because to understand the topic you need theory, tasks, easy tasks, hard tasks, and then of course as a revision I have the exam module there in the course with all the topics once again in a kind of exam simulation format with the time, with the the timer running out and everything. So that's also an approach that I have. And another thing that I would like to mention is that what I saw online a lot when online tutors were talking about their work experience is that when you're giving a class and someone cancels it 5 minutes beforehand or on very short notice, some people say, okay, the class is kind of paid for, it's canceled, yes, but the money is not returned, or it's kind of, it doesn't say, so you don't have the class remaining, it just kind of, it's done in the schedule of the tutor. And I understand the idea of it, because the tutor's time is of course as precious as the student's time, but for me, really, I don't get mad at this. For example, if someone cancels last minute, and it's because I know that all the students who are preparing for the entrance exams abroad, they know it's a priority for them, and they respect their time and my time as well, and they would not cancel a class just because they want to. Of course, they usually have valid reasons for that, and we're all human, life happens, so of course, how would I get mad at it? Because once we were supposed to have a KM1 class, that's the math subject at the first semester that's taught during the first semester of UBB. I also teach that, because one day I was like, okay, what else can I do? I'm a bit bored, so I was like, first university math. Funny story. Then I was super overwhelmed at some times, but worth it. And a student, we were supposed to have a class. I called a student and he's not picking up, and then he answers, but he's answering in a raspy, sleepy voice, and I understood that he probably took a nap and it got a bit too long and longer than he expected. And some tutors would be mad. I was like, okay, do you disrespect me? Am I not good enough as a teacher? Blah blah blah. I don't have those kind of complexes. And for me, it was just a normal human being taking a rest, because I know that the person was managing 2 universities at the same time and managing a lot of other personal things. So I was very kind, and I was like, don't worry at all, it's totally fine, I get you, we can just move the class to another day during the week, and that's it. So because this kind of approach that the class is kind of cancelled, but it kind of disappears from the classes that you have, it's not something that I like. I understand why it's like that, but it's not something that I like. That's why I don't implement it in my job. So another story from this year, and also it happened in the previous years, was when students, they text me about, and usually it happens maybe a week or so before the entrance exam, when it's actually really, when the pressure is really high, and they tell me, hey Maria, I had one story from this year I'm going to talk about it a bit more, but the stories repeat themselves every year. And the person told me that, hey, I was preparing beforehand, and I'm graduating from an Austrian high school, so he's more familiar with the concepts and everything. And he was like, okay, I prepared beforehand and I kind of think I'm ready, but I'm not sure, and that's why I'm considering either taking the course or the exam simulation. And he was like, okay, what's best for me? And of course I answered what's best for him, because technically for me, monetary wise, it makes more sense to recommend the course and to kind of try to kind of steer the decision that way, because of course it just costs more than the exam simulation. But it's not my intention and it's not my goal to do that, because I know that with 1 week left or 2 weeks left, it's technically possible to cover the course if you really try, if you put in a lot of hours. And I told it to the person who was asking me, I was like, hey, if you do this and this and this daily for this many hours, you technically can make it, but it's really unlikely, because of course you have a plan, but sometimes things don't go according to plan. So it makes more sense for you, money-wise, time-wise, everything-wise, to take the exam simulation, try it out, to see where your preparation took you. So do you know everything, or do you need to revise something, or where should you put your focus on, in math or economics or anywhere? And actually, well, some weeks go by and the person texts me, hey, I got accepted, thank you a lot for your help. And I was really glad that I could help make the person the right choice for them and not for me. So of course I would put you and your situation and what you give me as your educational background as a priority, to see what's best to do in your case. And another thing is that I keep my promises. That's actually important. So when you have a person and they stay true to the word, that's usually a very good sign. And that story dates back to when I didn't launch the course yet. So it was still in the making. And I was posting a bit about the university because I was teaching English at the time. And I was showing people that, hey, I study here, so I must know English pretty well if I study in English at the bachelor's program here in Vienna. And people were interested actually more in the university itself and my English teaching skills. So one person asked me about it, and I was like, hey, I'm making this course, blah, blah, blah. But you have to wait a bit. And he asked me how much will it cost. And before actually finishing everything, I was like, okay. In my mind, it didn't seem like too much effort. It turned out to be a lot more effort than expected. But I was like, okay, maybe around 60 euros. And it's yours later, but I still haven't launched. So wait, please. He was like, yeah, okay, sure. And we agreed on it. We had a call, and then I just texted him when it was launched. But when it was launched, I realized that it's so much more than I expected it initially to be. And of course, the price was higher. But I still sold the course for that initial price that I told the person who was asking me about it beforehand. And I kept my promise and stayed true to myself, even though, yeah, it turned out differently than I expected it to be. But a promise made, it should be a promise kept. Another thing is that I went through the same path that you're going now through, so I can put myself in your shoes and really empathize with you. And therefore, so when I'm giving a class and I see that the person is struggling, or I see they're doing really well, so of course different scenarios, different people, I'm as honest as I can be. So of course I do my best and give it all to help you prepare for the entrance exam and be really at your peak basically of knowledge. But in the course, of course, I have to be honest, because the VUBB program has only a 7% acceptance rate. And of course, if you study, the probabilities are higher, but still, it's a very competitive program. Sometimes it's not because of a knowledge issue. Sometimes I've heard at least 2 stories like this year, that the person who took the exam, they thought they submitted everything and everything is fine. And then they get an email from VU saying that, hey, your answers actually were not submitted. We cannot even see your exam. We don't have a record of what you answered. And then no matter how well you did, or no matter how well you prepared, it's done. You can't do anything. You cannot reverse it, or you cannot kind of argue with it. It's the final decision. So at the beginning of the course, of course, you have the description of how the exam goes and everything, what you should kind of prepare for technical wise, and some technical difficulties that you might have. But at the very beginning, you have a section called Plan Bs. So other options of universities that have similar programs, also English taught, and where else you could go, and what you could have as a backup plan in case something goes wrong on the entrance exam. And this is really important to understand, because of course I'm supportive and I really want to kind of motivate you to do your best and to try your best, no matter what your level of preparation is, because sometimes people who prepare really a lot, unfortunately miss it by 1 or 2 points. And people who were decently good, so medium preparation, they just collect themselves together all in one, like all their power and knowledge in one day. They really concentrate and get in. So of course it's different scenarios. So I want to make sure you're prepared for any scenario. So for a scenario where you get in, lovely. And for a scenario where you don't, and it's not kind of, you still have a plan and you still know where you're moving. Because if you put all your stakes on that day, first of all, it's much more pressure and it's much more stressful than if you have other options. Because if you kind of pressure yourself too much, then you might overthink, you might change wrong answers to correct answer, like correct answers to wrong answers and stuff like that, and just get overstressed or lose some time because you're trying to kind of pull yourself together during that stressful moment. And if you have other options and you know that, okay, if this doesn't happen, fine, it's fine for me, I have this and this and this option, I will go here and here and here, or I will do this and this and this, it actually takes a lot of stress out. And people who are not as stressed usually perform quite well in the exams because they concentrate better and they don't overthink and don't self-sabotage their answers, basically. So yeah, but yes, in the course you have the preparation materials that are needed to really understand and be able to answer the practice tasks and the exam tasks later on during the exam day. But of course I have to, well, be honest with everyone and say, hey, if in case this doesn't work out, it can happen for many reasons. This would be possible options, and you should start looking at them before the entrance exam day, because then in the summer, most programs and most enrollment procedures are already closed and they're over. And actually, talking about funny stories, sometimes, I had a student, very clever, he knew the course by heart, but then okay, I'm used to technical difficulties. I'm used to someone having the entrance exam, but the high school leaving exam on the same day. I've heard of this, but I had a new situation called a concussion. So basically, the student was playing football or like rugby, and he got hit in the head with the ball really, really hard, and he was hospitalized, and he got let out of it the day before the entrance exam. So he's smart. Nothing technical happened, but he's still, because of having a concussion days earlier and still not being fully recovered yet, he could not perform as well in the entrance exam as he could have with the knowledge that he had. So yeah, stories happen, different stories happen, so be ready for anything. And it's of course better to have 3 options than 1 option. Also, another thing that I do is that when I have a class, and I know it took a bit more time because of me, not because of the students, so because I got confused by the wording of the exercise, because when I was teaching KM1 and KM2, so the math subjects in the 1st and 2nd semesters of UBB, and when it was still new to me, when I was reading a task, most things, and like the theory and everything, most things are fine, so I could kind of steer it and could kind of guide the student on the theory and what he should do or she should do to solve the task, and where he should or she should look, and like the steps and everything to really explain the material. But sometimes when I would read a task, I would misunderstand what's needed and what it's asked. And of course it took a bit more time because of me, not because of the student. And in these cases, if I know it took 5 or 10 more minutes because of what I was trying to figure out, I extend the class for the time without charging for extra time. So basically we were going to have a 1-hour class, but it took some time to really understand what's kind of being meant, to really explain it properly. And in those cases, I would just extend the time by 10 minutes without charging it, because it's fair. And I like to be fair, I like to be honest. And in my head, that's the fair way to do it in these cases, to kind of behave in such situations. So yeah, that would be, and of course, for teachers, patience is key. So if you think, oh, I'm a bit shy to ask a question, or okay, this question seems so easy, why would I bother Marie with it? Don't you worry, because I started as an English teacher and I would teach kids in the very first months of working. And the patience level that I kind of acquired there is here. Because, for example, some student, when I was online, a student was having he had a flashlight, and he was shining it to the camera so that I couldn't see him what he was doing, because he was trying to play with the toys. I was like, yeah, sure. And then also I was tutoring 2 twins. I think they were around 9 years old, 10 years old, and they were playing football and everything. So very sporty, active kids. And sometimes they would fight, or sometimes they would be kids, basically. It's normal, they're kids. And the patience and the skills to handle such situations, they help you throughout life in any case, when you're dealing with academic or career or any issues that you have. And so don't you worry and don't you be afraid to ask me anything, because what you're asking me is totally fine, it's totally normal. Like, I'm very patient, and because of all the training I got very early on in my career. And with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I could give you a glance at what it is like to be my student. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments down below, and see you in the next videos. Bye bye.